What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Fun Month Wing. Today's episode, I'm going to be talking about technology horror involving technology, because I think it's a really fascinating kind of grouping of horror movies in general. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about some than others. Some I'm just going to briefly touch on as just ones that kind of came into my head. As far as ones that are also sort of could be maybe in this category. I originally, when I'm trying to film this, the first time I originally was trying to go in order of the, the release date and trying to keep it cohesive that way, and it didn't really make sense. So I'm going to kind of lump them together in the ways that make the most sense to me for me to talk about them. Any movie that I talk about in this video, which I will obviously address before I talk about it as far as title, there are going to be spoilers. I'm going to talk about the movie. I may talk about how it ends. I may talk about key things that happen in the film itself. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going through. If it's a movie that's like on your list, most of these movies are old. I think only two, looking at my notes, I think only two are from the last like few years. Yeah, 2014 and 2020. So otherwise they're all pretty old, but on the off chance you want to see them, there are going to be spoilers. So spoiler. So there was a couple that I had originally thought about kind of diving into, and then I kind of decided not to. And a couple of those would include things like 1983 Christine, obviously technology being the car and its impact and on the driver and like that whole story. I didn't really, because that one is more or less cut and dry as far as how the technology is used, I think I didn't really feel like I needed to talk about that one too much. Another two really. So Missed Call is another one. The American one came out in 2008. I don't know when the original one came out. But the original is either, I think it's either Japanese or Korean, and it has like a series of them. There's multiples, and I actually haven't seen any of those. I've only seen the American one, and that one has to do with cell phones specifically. Another one that I'm not going to touch too much on, but I actually did kind of like, was Shudder, which was also released in 2008, which also has in either a Korean or Japanese version of that as well. I didn't see that one. I've only seen the American one with Pacey from Dawson's Creek. That one was pretty interesting. It kind of reminds me of a video game called Bunker 16, I think is what it's called. It's a horror game, but and that one uses a camera as the technology. And then there's a lot of video games that have to do with technology too, but one of the big ones that kind of makes me think of, or that I think of when I think of Shudder, is Fatal Frame, which is a horror game that utilizes cameras as a way to fight ghosts and capture evidence, and so that's kind of used a lot too. But anyway, I digress. Not video game video. And then I think this one's kind of a cute one that could kind of go into the category, and that's going to be like Gremlins. So I think Gremlins, one of the things that they say in the movies is like, if you have a technology problem, you might have Gremlins, and that's still a joke that I use even like today. When technology doesn't work, I'm like, oh, let's have Gremlins. Like, so that one's kind of, but yeah. And then the other one that I'm not going to dive too much into, mostly because I just don't want to. And that one's Fear.com, which came out in 2002. And Fear.com is a website that when people go to, really bad things happen it's kind of like a a dark web kind of, movie essentially, where bad stuff happens. People go to that website. I saw that movie. Fun fact, I've only seen that movie one time, and it kind of stuck with me. But I saw that movie before I was old enough to see it. I'm just gonna put it like that. So I have a sister that like is all about sneaking me to see horror stuff. And so those are just kind of a few that kind of fall into this category. I'm not gonna talk a lot about. Because I have some favorites that I want to talk more about. So those are the ones that I'm going to focus on. And my first one, you may or may not have guessed if you've seen previous videos. And you know this about me already. It's going to be 1982 Poltergeist. Poltergeist is my first memory of life. It's the first horror movie that I ever saw. Granted, I did see it several years after its release because I was born in 88. So it had already been out for a long time. But it's one of my first memories of life, and also the reason that clowns make me so uncomfortable. Not Pennywise. Nope. That clown doll from Poltergeist. And Poltergeist is an interesting one because of the time frame that it came out. So by that point in the early 80s, TVs were a really normal thing. They were in everybody's homes. Like they had them in multiple rooms starting at this point. It wasn't the same little box that was only in one room, and like you only had like two things you could watch or whatever. Like by this point, television was kind of blowing up as far as like being a normal part of your life. And it becomes the way in which the spirits and this portal that gets opened from the house is like, that's how they communicate originally, and that's like the way to communicate between the dimensions, I guess. And so that one is kind of a staple. I feel like if you're going to talk about technology, horror that includes technology, however you word it, I feel like that's kind of a big one. Even when later on in the movie, when they're before they go to try to get her back, it's just a really big part of that film. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting to think about it. I don't know if this is intentional or not. It may not be. But it's kind of interesting to think about what that means as far as maybe being a statement on the movement of television and what that meant for families and their children. And, kind of like now everyone's like, don't let your kids watch TV or have tablet time. And we kind of live in a world of technology in general, so you kind of have to let your kids do that. But anyway, I digress. So that's my first one. And that kind of brings me to my next one, which is Ring from 2002, the American one, not the Japanese one. Although I have seen both. I'm just going to kind of focus on the American one. It's the one a lot more people have seen. So in the story of The Ring, the way that Samara's story is told is through a VHS tape. And this is during a time where VHS tapes were really normal, and people, especially blank tapes, people are not, like, it wasn't just as kind of an afterthought to think about not using a blank tape for, all kinds of families have recorded over stuff and lost stuff because they wanted to record something else. And so essentially, you there's this tape that has nothing written on it. You don't know what it is. It's a blank tape. And when you watch it, you see these series of odd things that don't make sense until the movie gets kind of going. And then after you watch it, you get a phone call that says in 7 days you're going to die. Well, it just says 7 days, but it's essentially the countdown to your death. And we find out much later that a lot of those images are actually from the mind of the little girl that created the tape to begin with. And that the only way to save yourself is to show the tape to other people, or to make a copy of it, rather. And it's really interesting because I remember seeing that movie when it first came out. I was in middle school, I think. And I remember going to like a sleepover for a birthday party and watching that movie, and the parents laughing and like making the phone ring, and we all like screamed and freaked out. I remember being pretty scared. So that was a pretty good one. I like that one too. But that one's another one that kind of utilizes the television as a way to kind of create this like doorway for Samara to come from her horrible wherever she is to our domain, plane. I don't know. Words are hard. And television's used for that in an obviously really big way. And then the other one that kind of involves television is going to be White Noise, which came out in 2005. I actually really like White Noise. Not one of the higher rated horror movies, which is kind of surprising. Because White Noise is one of the ones where I didn't just like, the scares, but I thought the story was really good. Like really good. And it's got Batman in it. I mean, like, Michael Keaton is such a phenomenal actor. And I think like, I don't know. That was one I actually saw in theater. I was in high school when that one came out. And I remember being pretty into it when I saw it the first time, and the scares being really effective and the story just being crazy. But essentially, if you haven't seen it, the short of it is that it is a movie about obsession and utilizing modern day technology, recording devices, television sets, radio signals, that sort of thing, to communicate with the dead because of said obsession. We start out with this guy and his wife getting this really great news, and then they find her car, and then they announce her dead, and he doesn't understand why, and he starts seeing this guy kind of following him around, and he confronts him, and he tells him that his wife used to go see him to hear things, because he captures voices and stuff using all these TVs and these different radio devices and stuff. And he tells him that he's heard his wife, and he asks if he wants to come and hear her. So it kind of is this interesting story about this man who lost his wife way too soon. They just found out she was pregnant, and wanting an answer, like wanting to know what happened when everything seems so great. And that's kind of how it turns into this weird obsession. Like as the movie goes along, Michael Keaton's character is obtaining more and more TVs. He's unplugging like monitors, and that's he's like using anything and everything he can just for the small chance that he could hear from his wife again. And it's essentially it's a monitoring system. So like there's parts of it where it shows like multiple spirits, including some not so great ones. And then my favorite part about this story, because I just think this is just such a crazy thought to even think like if this were reality, is there's these three entities, they're shadow figures, and they show up multiple times throughout the film that are sort of like these watchers of the ghost realm. Like there's sort of these like guardians in place to like make sure that humans don't learn more than they're supposed to, or that humans don't interfere when they're not supposed to, because that's another thing that happens is he interferes and tries to save someone that's meant to die, and they don't really care for that too much, and so their way of like getting rid of a human is, that's in the way, is they kill them, and so that's how it is. And but it's just a movie. I mean, as far as the technology side of it, it's using technology to fulfill an obsession, and maybe crossing some boundaries that like humans aren't meant to cross. And it's kind of a crazy thing to consider, like what if that were reality? What if the real truth is that we're not meant to know the truth, and there are things in place to prevent us from figuring it all out, which is a creepy, like that to me is like a really eerie feeling in general. So thinking about it that way to me made the film a lot scarier, just in my opinion. Which brings me to my next two, which is the original Pulse, which came out in 2001, and the new one, which came out, the American one, which came out in 2006. So the original is a Japanese film, takes place in Tokyo, and I actually just recently watched that one like not that long ago, and I saw the American one first, probably not long after it came out, and I kind of forgot actually that Kristen Bell is in that, because when I think of her, I always think comedy, but she was really good in that as like a horror actress. Anyway, I digress. So if you haven't seen either Pulse movie, they're very different, which is typically the case when we do an American remake of something that's like from like a Japanese filmmaker or Korean filmmaker. Their visuals and their like vision for horror is so vastly different from how we view horror and do horror like in the States. So it's interesting to see the differences between the two. So the similarities are, they're both about the internet, more or less, which is interesting in and of itself. And essentially, the internet and the connection to the internet, or data in general, because in the other one they use cell phones as well. In the American one, they use the cell phones as well. And using that technology to create a portal for the undead to come in and take over the world of the living, sort of. Not really take over, I guess, but they can come in and out. And the other thing that they have that's in common is that there's this server that is believed to be the source of all of it. However, when in both situations they go to stop it to prevent anyone else from dying or losing anyone they love, they're not successful. And it makes it so that no technology is safe anywhere. No technology that's connected to the world, like internet, data, whatever, however you look at it. So the major differences from the Japanese film to the American film is the Japanese film focuses a lot more on the isolation of the relationships during the time in which this takes place. A couple of people start going into these rooms and they're seeing these people who are like dead or killing them, or look like they killed themselves, and they don't, and it's a very weird thing to look at, and it freaks a lot of people out and makes them really uncomfortable. So there's a couple different stories that go on throughout that version. But one of the big things for that one for me that I actually really did like is it had this weird concept of like the human withering away, as if to say that having internet and having access to all of these things and wanting to be such a big part of technology somehow makes you less human. It takes away pieces of your humanity a little bit over time until you literally turn into ash on a wall. And that's what happens in the Japanese version. There would be these outlines of black ash where the people have just disappeared. Like, it's like, and it's this really kind of slow descent. Like they start kind of not being themselves, and then, you know, it's just kind of this like slow thing over and over, and then like they take their own life, or their life is taken from them, and there's just this black ash mark. It's really interesting, and that one, the Japanese one, specifically focuses more on the internet side of things, and then in the newer one, the American one that came out in 2006, it focuses on like some other elements too. Like it uses like a printer. There's like a washing machine scene that made me super uncomfortable. There's this whole bit about cell phones. Like it dives a little more into like other pieces of technology, as if like the message became bigger. I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to tell when horror is trying to be woke and when it's not trying to be woke. Like sometimes you can read between the lines, sometimes it's really obvious, but to me, because of the focus on technology and it taking away parts of humanity and making it so that, like, at the end of the American one, our two protagonists, like chunk their cell phones out the windows and they go and live where there's no signal, because that's the only way to exist anymore. As if, you know, the only way you can truly live your life is if you're not invested in technology in this way. And it's interesting considering the time frames too. So the Japanese one came out in 2001 and the American one came out in 2006, and the internet blowing up around that time frame in both of those years. It's just interesting to think about what it may be trying to say. What point is it trying to get across? Is there a message there? Is there not a message there? But those are really good films. As separate entities, it's interesting that they're the same story, because they really just don't feel like they are. I liked both of them for very different reasons, though. That's Pulse, Japanese, and then Pulse, the American one. And then the other one I'm going to talk about for just a second, that I don't have one that kind of goes along with this, that's on my list, is a movie called Stay Alive, which came out in 2006. And Stay Alive is another movie that doesn't have these phenomenal ratings, but is a phenomenal movie. So Stay Alive, if you don't know what it is, if you've never heard of it, is a movie about a video game that kills you when you play it. If you die in the game, you die in real life. And it's interesting because the story starts out about this guy who is in the video game world. Like he's like a beta tester or something. Anyway, knows a lot about video games, plays a lot of video games. So he's playing this game with his roommate and his roommate's girlfriend. It's a horror game called Stay Alive. And this is the very beginning of the movie. And it shows some pieces of the game itself, of the gameplay, which I must say are so fucking well done. So well done. Like, even by today's standards, I feel like the video game elements that they did that are put in that film are just really well done. Anyway, so the roommate and the girlfriend, they die in the game. So in the middle of the night, when the other guy gets up, he goes to check on them, and they're killed in the bedroom exactly how they were killed in the game. And the same thing happens to him. And then at his funeral, his little sister gives one of his best friends a box or suitcasey type thing with all these games and stuff, and just stuff that they thought he would, because they grew up together and his family essentially raised him, that they would, you know, that he would want all of that stuff. And then he ends up playing the game with a group of friends, and they have to figure out how to stop it from killing them all. And the video game itself is actually about Elizabeth Bathory, one of the OG vampires. If you don't know the story about Elizabeth Bathory, the short of it is, she was a wealthy woman that had these like virgin-esque maidens that worked for her, and one day on accident one of them cut themselves and bled on her, and she believed what she saw was that the blood made her skin look more youthful, and like, so she just starts killing a bunch of bitches and bathing in their blood. And that's the story for the video game. And she's the main antagonist, but there's a lot of like other ghosts and stuff, things that happen in the game. Video games are such a hot button subject for a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. You know, there's the violence argument about video games making people or / kids violent. There's the conversation about, well, it's not a real sport, even though people are competitive, and it's definitely a skill set and a strategy based thing to make money playing video games. There's this Jimmy Kimmel hard roll there. Made the comment on his show one time that he thinks basically that Let's Plays are really stupid, that watching other people play Let's Plays is really stupid, even though it's the exact same thing as watching people play sports. You're not playing. It's literally the exact same thing. Anyway, I digress. I won't go down that rabbit hole. But video games are just a really big, interesting subject matter, depending on who you're talking to. And I grew up in a household of gamers. My husband is a gamer. I have friends that are gamers. I follow YouTubers that do Let's Plays. I do Let's Plays. I still consider myself a gamer, even though I don't have a lot of time to play as many things as I would like to. The good thing about having voices is it does give me an opportunity to look into some horror games that I'm really interested in. So there is that. But the subject matter around playing a horror game that can kill you in real life is very interesting, especially because it has to do with this old story. And it was really good. I really liked the actors in it and actresses that were in it. I really liked the story. I was really happy with the ending. Y'all know I don't like happy endings, and this movie does not have a happy ending, and I love it. It was really good though. I really liked that one a lot. And I'm sure on some level it's I don't know. To me, that one didn't feel as much of a statement piece. To me, it just felt like a fun movie about a horror game and what would happen if it could make you play it when you don't want to play it. You die, and then it comes and kills you in real life. That's a really interesting concept to me. And video games. So I liked it a lot. That was a good one. Kind of winding down, I'm going to take us to my last two, which I'm actually, honorable mention really quick. I feel like the subgenre of found footage can kind of be chalked into technology horror because it utilizes technology to tell a horror story. However, if I were to talk about all of the found footage movies that I like, this would be a really long video because that's my favorite subgenre. So that includes Monster Project, all the Paranormal Activity movies, Blair Witch Project, found footage 3D. I've seen so many. Creep. There's a lot of found footage films that utilize that technology as a way to tell the story. So those are absolutely part of technology horror. I just didn't want to break them all down for this video because it would be very long. And it would be kind of redundant because the technology is the camera, right? So anyway, I digress. So for the next, my last two is going to be, the first one is Unfriended, which came out in 2014. Unfriended was done by MTV and was shockingly pretty good. Unfriended is a story that utilizes technology in the sense of social media. And I don't know, I guess you wouldn't really I don't know what these would be called, these last two, because they're not really found footage, but they kind of are because there's no third person perspective. It's all cameras from the laptops of the friends and stuff. So anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole either. But anyway, so with Unfriended, it's a story about this group of friends on the anniversary of this day that one of their old friends killed themselves. And while they're chatting on Skype and interacting with each other, they sort of, this random person shows up in their chat. It doesn't show a video, it just shows that there's someone there. And they spend a lot of time trying to get rid of them. It doesn't work. And then they end up wanting to play this game where it's you have to tell the truth. And if you don't tell the truth, then one of your friends dies. And essentially what you find out through various social media, this movie was, I didn't personally think it was very hard to keep up with, but it does bounce back and forth a lot between Facebook, Spotify, or maybe it's not Spotify, 2014. I don't know, Spotify, iTunes, something like that. iMessenger, Skype, YouTube, I think is the other one, but it utilizes all of those different platforms multiple times in the movie to tell the story. And the story is that their friend killed themselves because somebody posted a very disgusting video of something that happened to this person when they were drunk. And one filmed it, another posted it, and she got really badly cyberbullied and ended up taking her own life. So on the anniversary, she comes after them with a vengeance. Some of the kills are really cool. Really cool. And that's the story of as far as what Unfriended is and what it's like. I really liked that one a lot. Because it was made by MTV, I'm not going to lie, I had some And it is very much because the kids they're like supposed to be teenagers, so there are some parts where you're just like, oh god, fucking teenagers, right? But when it starts really getting into the thick of it, like you'll find, at least for me, like I was very intrigued pretty much from the beginning, and I loved the way that it was done with all the different social medias and showing just what cyberbullying is and where it comes from and how it gets so bad so fast, in ways that people are able to do it and make people and ridicule people and make people feel like garbage to the point that they'd want to take their own life. And in most cases, they're not coming back for vengeance. They're just gone. And it's just an interesting story about friendship as well, which, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my high school friends were not real friends. I have like my one friend from high school I knew before high school, and I'm not friends with anybody from high school anymore. Not like that. So it's a very interesting story about friendship and the use of social media and its role in cyberbullying. And it was very, very good. I highly recommend that one. Very satisfying ending, if I do say so myself. And then my last one for this one is going to be Host, which came out in 2020. First full-length film that was released, that was filmed completely in quarantine. None of these people were in the same room. They were all, except for one part, they were all separated. There's even there's even a part where one of the girls goes outside and she puts on a mask. Like, it's very pandemic-y in that regard. But Host is a story about a group of girlfriends that are going to do, well, there's a guy friend too, but he doesn't play a very big role in the main part of the movie. They are going to do a seance with this spiritual person that the main protagonist is like involved with, that she like interacts with and does things with. And essentially the storyline is that one of the friends doesn't take it very seriously. She's super disrespectful. She lies about something happening to her, and she makes up a person and a story. And this is kind of a common theory thing. And that's that, this concept of manifesting things that you're afraid of, so that if enough people are scared of it and enough people are fearful of this thing, it kind of creates itself. Some people believe that about like Slender Man and I don't know, other things like that. So it's just this concept that if you make up something or you think something hard enough and you create fear around it, that it's going to make it real. The Rake, that's another really big one that's like that. That's kind of like what people think. Anyway, so and that's what happens. This spirit is created. And it's angry, and it starts doing some crazy shit to these girls. The scares for this to be all done again from the camera on the computer are really effective. Some of them are very subtle, some of them are not very subtle, but it was really, really well done. The acting was really good. The sequences that had the paranormal activity were really well done. I really liked the story, the character, like the way that these actresses push their characters, like it felt very real, because I feel like everybody has these types of friends. Like I talk about like one of my my horror tropes that I hate is like this concept of the non-believer, like the person who wants to come in and start taking over shit and telling you what's what because they don't believe, and like they think it's a big joke, and then they're usually the cause of the issue, or they make the issue worse because of how they're behaving. And that's exactly what happens here, and it's just really well done. That one came out again in 2020. That it's I really like using these social things. Like that one utilizes Zoom. And it's really cool because the Zoom meeting, if you're not familiar with Zoom but you can go into Zoom and you set up meeting times, and you can choose how long the meeting is going to last. And so the meeting lasts the length of the movie. And it's really interesting because like towards the end of the movie, it says like the Zoom warning of like, this film, you only have X amount of minutes before this meeting ends. And then it ends like this crazy point, and then the Zoom meeting like cuts off. I don't know. It's just really, really well done. I highly recommend that one. And like I said, I really like the use of for Host and Unfriended, utilizing like really modern technology to tell a story and how it can affect people and both of these are supernatural senses, but just in general, I thought it was really cool. So that's my video on technology horror. I think this went a lot smoother than my first attempt to film this. I felt like it was a bit too scattered, so I decided to redo it. Hopefully it is. Hopefully you agree. Man, holidays are right around the corner. That's fun and very exciting. Because every time I sit down to film anything now, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much to do. Yeah, so I hope you guys have a fantastic Thanksgiving if you celebrate, if you're doing things with your families or with your friends. I hope you enjoy it, that you're safe. Have a good rest of your week and enjoy your weekend. And I will see you in the next one.